Welcome to the Patrick Real Estate Show, where we explore the fascinating world of real estate investing with your host, Patrick Switek. Patrick is a dynamic young entrepreneur and an accomplished real estate investor who's passionate about helping others achieve financial freedom. Each week, we sit down with some of the most inspiring individuals in the real estate industry and delve into their personal journeys, lessons learned, and secrets to their success. Let's dive into this week's episode.
Dude, I got my boy Jason Samson on the freaking pod. I am so pumped to have you on, man. For the people that don't know Jason, Jason is a very established investor in Hawaii. He's got over 60 co-hosting units at this point. He's also in the midst of the recent acquisition of a short-term rental property management company, which we've worked together on, and he's been freaking crushing it. He flips houses. He dabbles in everything. He owns homes. He rents them out. I think you also do long-term, I'm pretty sure. So he does it all. He's an investor to the core. But his game, he's got short-term rentals as well, and he's been in the game for a while. He just bought a management company. We're going to talk all things process. He's in the thick of it right now, guys.
Oh, yeah.
He's literally, as of today, I couldn't even get him out for an hour of a pod. You know how hard that was? He was like, man, in the trenches. So I'm so grateful for him to be here, share his story, share the things he's thinking about in the midst of this acquisition, talk all things co-hosting, short-term rentals, investing. Jason, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for having me, Patrick. Appreciate it. Thanks
course.
for taking me out of the trenches for an hour so I can take a breather from being in the trenches for sure.
100%, man. 100%. I'm here for that. So let's get started. Jason, let's hear about Jason before he got into investing, the pre-life. What happened and how did you get into it?
Yeah, I grew up in the California Bay Area. You can say that real estate was in my blood, actually. So my parents were entrepreneurs in real estate. My mom was a mortgage loan officer. My dad was a real estate agent. So I grew up around that. They owned their own brokerage at one point, running their own company, always self-employed in real estate. And so naturally, I didn't get into real estate. I got into tech. So I found myself in tech for over 10 years, close to 15. And I was in product management. I think you and I, can talk about that. But I was in product management. After a while, I found myself in financial technology. So in the fintech space, adjacent to real estate, where I was helping financial institutions build some of their lending software for mortgages and everything. And then I found myself at Rocket Mortgage, working there as a director of product management. And so I was around real estate a lot and around the industry, but not necessarily, and around the mortgage industry, but not necessarily working in it. But over the past 7-8 years, just had this like real estate investing bug that just kept on growing. I was listening to Bigger Pockets podcasts. I was reading all the real estate books, a couple books that just really flipped my mind about getting into real estate. I wanted to take action, but I was on the sideline for a while because I was working a W-2, was getting paid well, and had a comfortable situation and didn't really know where to start. But when I first started getting into real estate, it was really actually at my long-term home, my primary home that I had. I lived in Long Beach at the time. We had a detached garage, and we said, hey, let's turn this garage into an ADU. And this was back before ADUs were a thing, and so it was really hard to figure out what kind of value we'd get out of it. But we decided to do it, and this is the first STR fail I actually had. We did a beautiful renovation on it, did a burr on it, turned it into an ADU, a one-bedroom ADU, and right when we finished construction was March of 2020. So we finished it right at the start of the pandemic, and in hindsight, we probably should have, our intention was to make it an Airbnb. And our intention was good, and looking back, we probably could have done it and crushed it. But during the time, it was on our property. We would share the backyard, and we were just like, it was just not the time to have strangers coming in and out of our backyard and in our space. And so we ended up not doing that, and we held on to it. But we ended up looking at different markets. I invested in a long-term rental here in Hawaii, and decided to make a move to Hawaii and sell that house. And we ended up doing well selling that place at the right time of the market.
Awesome, man. And so you sold that other house. You moved into your long-term rental, or did you come out here and rent?
Yeah, so I came out here, and we at the same time that we have some family out here, so we're like, hey, Hawaii's kind of cool. We came out here to visit during the pandemic. I was still working at Rocket Mortgage, working East Coast hours, working up at 3 a.m. out here in Hawaii, and we're visiting here for 2 weeks, and 2 weeks turned into 2 months, staying at my sister-in-law's house just because, why not? It was during the pandemic, and we invested in long-term rental here. And then we were also looking at the market in LA, and we're like, holy crap, the market's just crazy. So we're like, let's just list our house for sale and see what happens. And this was the house with the ADU. And we listed our house for sale, and within 3 weeks got a crazy offer. And so we sold the house, and we were like trying to figure out where should we live. And we said, we just invested in the long-term rental in Hawaii. Why don't we just move to Hawaii for a year and see what happens? Just live in the rental instead of renting it out. So we did, and 1 year's turned into 3 pretty fast here, and we decided to build our life out here in Hawaii. But yeah, that first long-term rental, and then that basically burning that house in LA and selling that really got me going on the real estate journey. And from there, I joined a short-term rental mentorship, decided that this was the path I wanted to go, and I wanted to own homes in all the places that I like to visit. And so we started to take some money out of our 401k, put it into some homes, and really started our real estate investing journey there, and with a focus on furnished rentals.
Awesome, man. So where were you at with that? What was your strategy going into investing into short-term rentals? You said you were really focused on furnished rentals, so midterm rentals in that kind of realm.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Really, we just wanted to focus on the markets that we want to spend time in. So our first focus was Vegas. We go to Vegas all the time, and we know that's a growing market. And so we got our first furnished rental there, and our next stop was Hawaii. So we wanted to have one here. And so we started to invest. We got our first property in Vegas, and then shortly after, we started to get into properties here in Hawaii. That was also the same time that creative finance opened up my eyes to acquiring properties. So started to acquire a lot of properties through subject to or seller finance, and was able to acquire a few properties. And yeah, started to really grow the portfolio, really leverage the knowledge I got from my short-term rental mentorship. Shout out to Host Camp, Rob Abasolo, and the crew and the community there. Really great community. And so as I started to grow that, it was interesting because at the time that I was ready to scale, I met my business partners. And this was just a little over a year ago. And so my business partners here, they host monthly meetups. They're really big fix and flip investors out here. And I met them just a little over a year ago, and basically just approached them during one of their meetups and said, hey, I'm trying to figure out my roadmap to success here. You guys obviously seem like you know what you're doing. Can you just meet with me to help me talk through my options? I just want to know what the next 3 to 6 to 9 months can look like, and what paths I can take. And they were gracious enough to spend an hour with me. And this is why networking is just so amazing, because we spent an hour, and the intention of that conversation was, help me out and figure out my path forward. And in talking, I started telling them about my furnished rental background. And they said, hey, we've got a ton of furnished rentals. You have experience. What if we just start a company together? And it was just a crazy idea we just threw out there. And we're like, that's interesting, right? Let's start a furnished rental management company. And we started to meet, we started to talk about it, and a few weeks later, I put together a business plan. I leveraged my product management background, put together a business plan and everything, and just said, hey, this is what it could look like. Does this look interesting? And we both looked at the numbers. We both looked at the cost savings it would have for us and what that can look like, the business value proposition. And really the impetus for it was, they have a large portfolio of furnished rental properties. I have a growing portfolio. I have the expertise. If we're able to launch a furnished rental management company, we can run it ourselves to reduce our costs. Instead of paying top dollar for another company, we can manage it ourselves, make sure that it's managed at the highest level. And then once we get an operation going, we can start to offer that service to other people. Made a ton of sense. We said, let's start it. And just about a year ago, we launched and started to scale from there.
So how many did you have a year ago?
A year ago, we just started with a few. So we had my Vegas property, and they had about 2 or 3 that we started with. And so we just started with 3 or 4 to get going, and then we started to really ramp up. A couple months in, started to get all their properties on. I started to acquire more properties. And about 6 months in, we were about 20 properties deep already. So we were really scaling fast. Obviously, our portfolios together was able to scale fast. And then with their reputation and everything, we were able to really start to bring in some clients as well. And so We found ourselves 6 months, 6 months in at about 20 properties and starting to get some traction in the market. And then an acquisition opportunity came our way and we dove into that a little bit, which was
Oh,
awesome. Yeah.
okay. So acquisition opportunity. This is where me and you met, right?
Yeah, for
You,
sure.
I mean, you did come to me and you're like, Patrick, I see what you're doing with this acquisition stuff, and you wanted to learn how to take it on. But let's talk about first, how did you even get the opportunity to do that?
I mean, everything's just so organic and just about your network and who and everything. And so this particular property management company was the one that my business partners were using. Tristan and Kamahai are my business partners. They are, huge fix and flippers here. They have an HGTV show. They have a pretty strong reputation in Hawaii. And they have been using a property management company for a while, and they actually were good friends with that person because they've been using it for a while, and they were also investors. As they started to pull their properties off of his company, transition to ours, he started to talk to them about, hey, you're moving all your properties off. What's going on? How can we keep you? And they're like, we'd love to stay, but it doesn't make sense for us to stay because we have our own company now. And this was actually a conversation that me and Tristan had a few months back. And we were just saying, hey, at some point, let's just offer a merge to merge with the other property management company. And she was like, yeah, we'll just merge with them at some point. But we didn't know that opportunity would come so fast. And so when he came back and said, hey, let's try and stay on, she just threw it out there and said, hey, what if we just merge? Let's just talk about it. And he said, sure, I actually want to get more into other business areas of real estate. So let's go. And she was like, awesome. Let me connect you with my business partner, Jason. Let's go. And so from that point on, it was just ongoing negotiations about what this can look like, getting to know each other and all that stuff. But the cool thing was that there was a lot of trust built in from the get-go because they had been partners for a while. They'd worked together for quite some time. And obviously, I was their business partner, so there was a lot of trust up front. And there was an opportunity, and it seemed like it really aligned for both sides.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'll say a lot of people ask me, how do you find these opportunities? I'm sorry to say, all three of mine were through networking. So
Yeah,
it's the
it
best
really
way
is.
to do it because you already have trust. You're already in, especially in my market, Joshua Tree, like that's where all my acquisitions happen. So super simple. But at the same time, there are ways to go out to buy, biz, sell, and find deals. But I'll be honest, I think the organic route is the best if you can manage it that way. And then obviously, if you go to buy, biz, sell, or go to brokers, that's always a great way to do it too. I know people that have bought from brokers, and there's pros and cons to both, right? Direct to seller, and it's just direct to seller. You just don't want to get screwed on that, right? You just got to make sure you're doing everything correctly. So how did you guys structure this deal with, first of all, how big is the deal? What does it look like? What made you intrigued on taking it down?
Yes, the deal. I'll talk about the size of units. So he had over 40 units that he was managing, and so that would take us from 20 at the time to over 60. And for me, the way that I was looking at my operation, I was still building a very lean operation. So I was able to bring on about 3 VAs. I also had a couple boots on the ground folks, but everyone was part-time, right? And so everyone's working like 30 hours a week. And I know that if I could get everybody full-time, that I would get that much more stability for them, that much more output from them. It would just be mutually beneficial. And so for me, this acquisition was more about how can I get my team full-time? How can I start to scale this? And how can I really test the operation we've built to see if it is scalable? And so that was the big intrigue for me. And also gave us an opportunity to expand to different markets, which I wanted to test out too. So we've been primarily in Hawaii, Vegas, and Florida. And then this actually allowed us to expand to California as well, which I grew up in California, so I've got a good footprint there. And that was really intriguing to me, which was scaling my operation and also getting over 30 plus more units and also getting my team to scale. And I won't talk revenue numbers, but the numbers actually play out pretty well for us as well based on how we did our acquisition structure and also how we did our lending for it as well. But yeah, that was really the impetus for it was to grow and scale and see if this was the first of many acquisitions. So we'll see.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So when looking at this, why not just keep scaling your business and why acquire?
Such a
Right? I know
great
you
question.
mentioned a few things there, but I just wanted to know
Yeah.
from your perspective.
Yeah, we got our operation flowing really well just because of our scale. And we got about 5, 6 months in, we were starting to get some organic clients. And I started to meet some clients and I was doing a little more biz dev. And I realized The sales cycle is really long. The sales cycle to actually sign on a client to be on a co-hosting client, it could be 3 to 6+ months, and that could be for like one unit. Honestly, I might as well be a real estate agent and sell a house, right? And so if I were to do that and do that 10 times to add 10 more clients, like how much more time would that take from me doing biz dev versus like really scaling an operation? And so the best way to scale that I saw was through acquisition. And that's when I started to see you on social media and started to see like other people thinking about scaling through acquisition. And so it just made a bunch of sense that scaling through acquisition was the best, most efficient way to scale. Because if I were to add 30 to 40 more units, that would take me probably 2 years, right? Organically. And so it was the best way to scale.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like an analysis at the end of the day. Do you think you can organically get to the same point as acquiring the business? And how much time is it going to take? And how much money is it going to take? So if you're doing organic and you're not spending any money, then it's going to be different than if you do organic and you pay people commission based. But there's also a cost to that. And there's also the cost of time. So it's like at the end of the day, it's an analysis of whether buying now versus waiting is worth it. So I totally understand. That's actually something that was going through my head when I was thinking about my third acquisition.
Just how much more, and the properties that you're acquiring, you're diving into the performance of them. When you're going through a due diligence process of acquiring, like you're really dissecting the performance versus when you're trying to bring on a client, you're really in the sales mode and you're looking at the exterior analytics and analysis of that, but you're not really diving too deep into how it's performed, or maybe it's a new property that doesn't have any history of performance. And having a history of performance for properties you acquire is definitely a plus as well.
100%.
Yeah.
So cool. You have this deal. And what is the next step for you?
Next step was like, what am I doing? What am I supposed to do at this point? This seems like a cool deal, but I have no idea what I'm doing. And so I start networking some more. And luckily I had a really cool person in one of my circles and one of my accountability groups from another investor group, Felipe, and he was going through an acquisition at the same time.
Yep, Felipe.
Yep. And Felipe was like, oh, hey, that's crazy because he's acquiring another company. So him and I were just talking through it. But we were both like, we need to mastermind with somebody. And he was like, hey, you should talk to Patrick. He knows what he's doing. And I was like, yeah, I've been following him for a while. And so I reached out to you and I was just like, I need some help, dude. Talk me through what are the next steps. I don't even know like how to put together a LOI, letter of intent. I don't even know all the structures or what things I should be negotiating. And getting with you was a huge piece to talk through all of the different areas of the negotiation.
Appreciate that, man. Appreciate it. So we talked. What was the first step that we took with the LOI, right? We first talked about the LOI and how to get that situated. So maybe walk us through how that worked and how the process was. Like I'm gonna know like step by step process for the audience, for everybody else.
Yeah.
To
So
hear
I mean, the first
what you went through.
If you're going through an acquisition company, I think the first thing you do is you just send out LOIs, right? Letters of intent that say, I want to purchase your company at this purchase price, and here's a potential deal structure. This was a little bit different because we were negotiating up front. We started the due diligence process already, which the due diligence should start after you sign the LOI. So this one was a little bit mixed in. But I think when I got with you, the first thing we said is, let's nail down this LOI. And I think some of the best practice deal structure things that you brought to the table was, hey, you can negotiate what the purchase price is, and this is how you actually value it. And so you told me that anything under 100 units is anywhere from a 1 to 2.5x valuation. When you get over 100 units, that's when it gets to 5x. And those are the industry standards, which, was very valuable because this is such a niche industry that having those valuation multipliers was critical. The second,
going off the multiple. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Just want to clarify. The multiples are off of what at a certain point, I think what we talked about is like after 40, it goes off of EBITDA, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And then before that, you were on the cusp, and we went off of management revenue for your units because we were just buying the assets pretty much.
Yeah, we went off the management revenue. We started to look at EBITDA too, and we realized that he had a pretty healthy percentage of EBITDA in the 30+% range. And so either way, actually, when you put the multiplier, it turned out to be very close to the same value. And so
what let's explain that. 1x to 2x management revenue is, let's say the property makes $100,000.
Yep.
So Jason was valuing that asset or that contract because that contract is the one thing that has value. Like you were more interested in the contracts than you were in the company as a whole operationally. And those contracts had value between 1x to 2x of management revenue, meaning $100,000 a year property, 20% interest rate, that's $20,000, right?
Yep.
So that's how much. So the valuation is between 20,000 to 40,000.
Yeah.
And obviously, we want to keep some of these numbers off. We're not going to talk about exactly what it is because I'm sure you don't want to share all that. But whatever you are comfortable sharing, maybe you can talk a little bit about the deal structure and some key principles that maybe were really helpful. And by the way, you got a slam dunk deal for both sides, honestly.
Yeah.
But it just worked. It was such a win situation, and it was well structured, to be honest.
Thank you.
You know, I'm happy that it went through that way.
I think it was well structured, and I think it's because it came with we had goodwill on both sides from the start. And yeah, we looked at his contracts, and one of the reasons why we focused on the contracts versus buying his company was because he had a couple of assets that he, had part of the company that we did not want to include. And so we, focused on the contracts. And yes, we looked at the contract value and then also the management revenue of that contract value. And then we gave it the multiplier. I gave him as high of a multiplier as I could because I wanted to show that we're valuing his company and his operation. We're still early. I think we were early in the game. We were less than a year old when we started this process, and his company had over 5 years of experience. And I was also acquiring his team as part of it, and so his team was going to help us with our operations. So I gave him the highest multiplier as possible, and I think he appreciated that from the get-go. And with that, we were able to negotiate even further, which gave us some favorable terms on our side because we gave him favorable terms on the valuation. And so one other key structure was that we decided that we would pay 60% of the purchase price up front and then 40% in 12 months. So that was super valuable for us too, because we were able to work in some other contingencies and other stuff as part of that. Another key piece that we put in there too was some of our contracts were 2-year contracts and some of them were less than 2 years. And so we had a contingency plan in there that if certain properties left within the first 2 years, that there would be a financial penalty for that. And not necessarily like a huge penalty, but we just wanted to make sure that once we acquire these properties on day 1 or day 90, if some of these properties just leave, we just bought all these contracts, right? Even if some of them might break the contract or whatever. And so we put in enough of a financial penalty that if all of the properties left, it was basically the equivalent of the purchase price, right? And so we penciled it out to where if they left, our purchase price was 0. And again, we have the 60% we paid up front and then the 40%. So if a good chunk of them left, we would pay less of the 40% left over for the balance in 12 months.
So it's seller financed. How did you get the 60% up front?
That was basically from you, right? I was like, hey, Patrick, how should I structure this? And you were like, you got to do 60% in the street.
I'm asking, how did you get that? That's funny. No, I meant like, how did you get the cash?
Oh, the cash. Okay, sorry. The structure idea, that was from you. So here's the cool thing about the way
I didn't give you cash. I was like, Jason, did you empty my account? I was like, dude, did you do something I didn't know about?
No. So this was the other cool part of the deal. Having business partners who consistently raise money for their flip operations gave us access to a lot of different people who wanted to invest in us. And so I've been successfully raising money myself for the past year, but my business partners are raising money at a different level. And so they have people, because of their reputation, they have people going to them saying, hey, I've got 200,000, I've got 300,000, here's money, just give me a return. And so we were looking for the purchase price amount, and they've been doing flips and whatnot, and they actually were maxed out on their flips. They had all of their flips covered. And it was right around purchase price time when another investor private money lender came to them and said, hey, I'd love to give you money for a return. And they said, we're actually pretty good on our flips at this moment, but we have this business opportunity if you're interested. And what was really cool about it was structures for flips are really pretty standard, right? So right now it's pretty much like a 10 to 12% interest only payments. is how people structure their flips. And that was the structure that we got. And so we got an interest-only loan at 10% we offered a 3-year or a 5-year balloon. This person wanted a 5-year balloon. So we said, take the 5-year, give us more time. Right? And so right now that pencils out really well for us because we looked at small business loans. We looked at other loan opportunities, and there's some really great lenders out there. Some of them wanted equity, and we're just too early. We didn't want to give equity. But with an interest-only loan right now, like that just gave us an opportunity to like significantly reduce our overhead every single month, right? Because if you're getting a small business loan, you're paying principal and interest. And that's a significant difference versus an interest only. And so on a monthly basis, that gives us the breathing room that we need to actually be profitable every single month. Obviously, we're going to put some money away, but we were able to get it from a private money lender at an interest only rate. And that was just amazing for us.
That's awesome. When you came up to me on that, I was stoked. I was like, oh. And it's funny because
I remember texting you, I was like, Patrick, bro, we just landed a private money loan. Like you won't believe the terms. It was awesome.
It was like 2 weeks before funding was due or something. It was something ridiculous. It was like last minute and you came up to me and you're like, hey, so I found out how I'm going to fund this deal. I'm like, this how long it took you? It was like, there's a way. You didn't even have an idea, but it's funny how everything falls into place, huh?
Yeah, we had backup options. We had people who really wanted to lend us money. They were just asking for equity. And I was ready to go that route, but we just felt like it was early to give equity. We wanted to save equity for different things down the road. And so we had some backup options, but when this came in our lap, we knew this was the right one. So we went all
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So cool, man. So obviously, okay, now you got the money part. You got LOI accepted.
Yep.
Terms are getting negotiated. You're going back and forth. We were working together on that, but going back and forth between the seller, making sure everything's good. The fact that there's trust already involved made it so much easier because they knew that you had their best intentions in mind as well. And I think totally. I just know just the way that it was structured and the way you guys were talking about it. That's important, right? Like the more trust you have, the better the deal goes. The deals that I didn't have the most trust with the owners or the ones that fell apart. My latest acquisition was incredible. The owners and we had a great relationship, and because of that, the deal went smoothly. And even though there was hiccups and we got 2 SBA loans that weren't able to get approved, we lost on 2 SBA loans, they still maintained patience. They had a lot of patience for us to be able to still close. So that's
another thing about funding, right? We talk about SBA loans. With these deals, is actually something we talked about was that the SBA process can take 3 months, right? And typically your due diligence process for an acquisition is going to be 3 months. And if you don't get approved at the end of that, you're not in a good position. You need to have backups. And so SBAs are great, but they may not be the best for this type of deal, depending on what you're looking at. So private money is a really good rate to go. I know some people also build up business lines of credit, which they can use for acquisitions. But again, just to give maybe concrete a little bit more about the private money loan, if we were to get a regular business loan, principal and interest only, or principal and interest, it would be, let's just say our monthly payment would be like $7,000 or $8,000 versus an interest only payment was much like a third or a fourth of that, right? And so that just really changes your business model. But as far as the trust, here's a good example about just how trust was able to help us in this process. We were going to the due diligence, and we actually hired our bookkeeper/CPA to help us with the financial due diligence. And we looked at it as mutually beneficial for us and the seller. It ended up that the bookkeeper was actually an investor who started his own bookkeeping company that the seller knew as well. So there was just good vibes and trust all around. And so I was basically giving this as a service to my seller and saying, hey, I'm paying for this due diligence, but you're going to get the benefit of this information as well. So when we got the report, we went through the report together with the seller. And during the due diligence process, our CPA looked through and said, hey, these are actually 3 properties that are underperforming. You may not want to include these in the acquisition. And so that was safety for me to see I should not include these. And for the seller, he was like, whoa, these are not performing the way I thought. I actually want to sell these properties and offload them on my portfolio. The trust there was awesome and actually helped people on both sides, because we would have gotten to a situation where we would have 3 underperforming properties and our relationship probably would have been contentious from the start of us taking over those things and to be underperforming. And yeah, financial due diligence is super important, and having that trust to help on both sides was really key.
Trust is going to be huge, especially in this situation where you're managing his properties after the acquisition. You're going to have you're his client now. So,
Yeah,
he's your
he's our
client
client.
now.
Yeah, and we talked
So,
about that a lot. It was like, hey, you're going to transition to being one of our top clients because of the 30 plus properties we got, over 15 were his, right? And so, yes, he's turned into one of our top clients. And I think one of the main reasons that he sold was he was saying like he's starting to focus on other areas of the business, and he knew that he couldn't take this operation to the next level based on how much time he was putting in. And so he was like, you're going to be dedicated to this. I'd like to see this operation, this company get to the next level. And so he's investing in us. Here's my team. Here's our SOPs. Here's our process. How can you take this to the next level? And he's going to be engaged in that. He's going to be engaged in that as a client. And for the first year, him and I are going to meet monthly to just go over things, to see how things are going. And he's going to be like an advisor for us, an unofficial advisor, or official advisor, right? It's not an M&A. It's a straight up acquisition, but he's staying on to help us out with that. And we've had a couple sessions already to go through, and he's pretty happy with our progress.
sweet. So let's get into the juicy stuff. Acquisition, the last stretch, right? The last mile. You did mention to me multiple times that the last mile was probably the longest. What happened there?
So we thought we were going to close about over 6 weeks before we actually closed. And it was probably a little bit on my part. So we signed the LOI. We put a lot of time into the LOI. And I just thought turning the LOI into actual purchase sales agreement, a PSA, was just going to be simple. And we actually drafted the LOI ourselves. We didn't really involve lawyers because we just wanted to make it make sense. And then we brought our lawyers in, and of course, both sides start to add. We had a simple 3-page LOI that turned into like a 40-page purchase sales agreement, which is totally, we wanted to make sure we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's. But during that process, again, the due diligence was critical. The seller started to find out more things about his business that he wanted to maybe change. And the last mile was him finalizing the list of properties that he wanted, list of assets and contracts we're going to offload. We found that a lot of his owners and contracts some were handshake agreements, or some were very like light month-to-month contracts. And we had to solidify contracts for every single owner, which tracking down owners is a whole another thing, right? He had to like track down the owners, explain to them what's happening. And then sometimes that opens up a can of worms about, oh, let's look at the properties and all that stuff. And there were just multiple conversations happening with owners. It was him looking at his portfolio a little bit, and then us renegotiating some of the terms that we initially agreed upon in the LOI. We initially had like actually higher penalties for if any of the properties left, and after it started to settle, I think he started to do the math and was like, oh, let's even this out a little bit more. I was able to compromise. We found some good compromise there. So that was just, for me, I maybe just underestimated. I thought it was like, we're going to be done and the LOI is signed, we're ready to go. But yeah, it took another 6 weeks, which just felt like 6 months, to be honest.
Cool. Yeah. There's always going to be different documentation aspects. This is a small business, really small business. Nothing like huge or anything, making 100 million a year. It's going to have that. And with our business as well, thinking about positioning it to sell and always thinking very intentionally about that. We're not doing everything perfectly. We definitely have some contracts that was handshake agreements. We just let it ride because we don't want to poke the beast. But yeah, I think what's really interesting about it is eventually you get to the finish line, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
explain that. How was it when the first day? What was your first day like as the new CEO of this company? What are you working on in the midst? Walk through a little bit of that.
I mean, I think I was texting you like the last week as we were closing, and I was just like a nervous wreck, just thinking about, oh my gosh, I don't think I've thought about the full transition plans. There was literally like probably 7 or 8 transition plans within the transition plan, right? And I had to prioritize what was important because we wanted to do some stuff with the website. How do we take both brands and put them together operationally? Like you've got some have their own Airbnb VRBO accounts. We have our own. When do we merge those? We're both using different channel manager platforms. They're using HostAway. We're using Hospitable. What about the messaging? How do we get the teams to work together? How do we onboard each team so that they both understand the properties on each side? So many questions. You're basically starting a new company from scratch, as much as you're merging and taking best practices, you're breaking down all of the Legos and you're building it back up. And day one was just like a holy shit moment. Where do I start? And I think what's important to know is just like, how do you keep the business continuing? And so the top two areas of focus were, how do we get the accounting transition prioritized to make sure that the money is, flowing the right way, both account payable and receivables? And then also, how do we get the software ensuring that it's going? Because if any of the software doesn't work, or it's not paid for, or it's not in the right accounts, account names and stuff, things are going to stop. And those are the tools that the team needs. And so those were the top two. I want to talk about reorgs and all this different stuff, but it was like, let's take care of those top two things and we'll go from there. And so I was able to work with my team to build out all the different transition plans for each thing, different roles and all that stuff.
Yeah, wait, hold on. You had a team. All right, let's talk about that. You had a team from what you were already building, right? You had a integrator and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Did you bring them into this acquisition?
I did. Yeah. So I have like my focused integrator and who's focused on running the operation for the most part. I'm still heavily involved in the operation. I've got a boots on the ground person here in Hawaii, and then I've got 3 VAs. And the team I'm acquiring had a full team of about 7 or 8 VAs as well. And,
wow.
Yeah, pulling them all together and figuring out like, how do we do it? Because one of the VAs there was basically like the people manager, even though she was a VA, but she was the people manager that was doing the scheduling and was like the one in charge. And so like, how do we merge these teams together? Your previous episode that just aired, you talked about a lot of organization and everything, which was huge because I totally agree with what you guys talked about as far as org structures are custom to every single organization. There is no best practice. It's really about, what are your skill sets? What do you want to focus on? What are your team skill sets? What's the best way for them to focus? And how do you ensure that there's no overlap and that everybody is efficient? Those are some of the questions you can ask, and then you just whiteboard from there.
I think that's the fun stuff. I think you like that stuff. You're telling me about the org stuff. I was like, dude, you got a lot of other shit to worry about than org stuff, man.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
You love that stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to find a scalable organization because I was like, okay, if I'm going to get the next acquisition, what's it going to look like? But you're like, dude, get your accounting and your software in place, which was important. And then try and figure out the scheduling and try and figure out how the teams are going to work together. And so I'm in the middle of all that right now. We're about 2 weeks into the acquisition. Taking care of all of those things is 12 to 14 hours a day. It really is. And it's 7 days a week. I was like, oh, hey, this was the part that I thought was going to be easier. But I was like, oh, okay, we've got the team. We've got 24/7 coverage. The weekends are going to be good because we have our overseas manager there. But guess what? They have questions. They have support questions. They have things they need to clarify. There's systems that aren't working over the weekend. So 7 days a week for the foreseeable future, I'll say that. I think I foresee probably another few weeks of this, but there's no breaks until you get the operation under control.
Did you budget this time? Because I know we talked about you wanted to focus on that. You're like, oh, I want to focus on other things afterwards.
It's not happening.
No?
Yeah, that's the goal, right? The goal is for me to be able to step back a little bit. I see that happening in probably 6 to 8 weeks, right? Be able to step back and have my operations person run a little bit more, so that I can look at other areas of burrs and flips that I'm doing and other acquisitions. But right now it's full steam ahead on this because you're, again, building the systems and the company up from scratch, and it deserves your undivided attention.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what's currently, how are the owners reacting? Have you talked to any of the owners? Like, where are you at with that?
So luckily, talking to the owners is going to be something that is something I pushed off for another few weeks, until the next month end reports, which is actually good because we're developing improved owner reports, which I think are going to be a really good communication tool. And so we're going to roll out communication with them. But I have talked to a few, and good thing is I think a lot of them understand that the previous seller that he's staying on, he's around, he's going to help advise. So they feel good about that. And they also know that he just really communicated how much he trusts us and what we're doing. And so I think a lot of the owners feel good about it, but we, at the end of the day, still need to perform. And furnished rental market, this is, some areas it's a little slow right now. And we're just wanting to focus on performance and make sure that we're doing what we have to do. And some of the owners that I've talked to so far, they seem happy, which is good.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's really good. What about the team? How was that? Because I know that's probably one of the most important things in my mind is, can I get the team on board? That's huge.
Yeah, it's a process. I think we need to build trust on both sides. I started during the due diligence process. I had one-on-ones with everyone on the team that we were acquiring. They had some concerns up front about, are you going to keep my role, all that stuff. So I gave some assurances about their role, that our intention is for us to grow. Our intention is not for us to have a scarcity mindset. We have an abundance mindset that we're going to grow. And so we wanted to make sure that they felt confident there. But I did let them know up front too that we're here because the owner believes that we can impact some really good change here. And so there are going to be changes. I don't know what all of those are yet. So I can't guarantee that the operation is going to continue as is. And so I gave them the assurances up front that that they're valuable and they're critical in their role. But I also set the precedence that we are going to make some changes. And so we're in the middle of that now, but it does take a lot of extra time to earn trust up front. And that's a process in itself. And so we're in the middle of that now, earning trust and learning how to work as a team.
Cool, man. That's so exciting, dude. I'm pumped, and you're in the middle of it. This is like awesome. Just awesome to just talk about it and just to hear about it. So
It's awesome to connect with other people too that are doing it, right?
Yeah.
So like you've built a cool community of folks that are acquiring properties or aspiring to acquire properties, and just to connect with those types of folks and just be around like-minded folks that are doing that. And things get really niche in real estate. There's 100 different ways you can build your real estate career. And with this specific niche of a co-hosting property management company, and also folks that are acquiring, that gets even more focused. And so I appreciate the community you're building and all the people that we've been able to surround ourselves with. Definitely great to have that
appreciate
support.
it, man. Yeah. And I'm happy that you're a freaking success case, man. You crushed it. I mean, you're literally the best thing. You're doing everything. You took action. You figured it out. You're like, oh, I'll find the money, and it just works out. And it's a testament to your work ethic and like putting shit together. So this is all, you want the Snoop Dogg interviews, like, I want to thank me. That's what I feel like with you, man. I want to thank me for putting myself out there, putting all the work in. But yeah, dude, it's been a blessing to have you. Honestly, to connect with you, I would consider ourselves friends. If you don't consider me as a friend, then just don't tell me. You'll
Nah,
hurt
you're a
my
good
feelings.
friend.
But yeah, you're a good guy, man, and you're doing good things. I'm pumped and glad you came on the pod. But before we kind of end things, I know we've talked a lot extensively in the community, in the mastermind, like the weekly calls. But I wanted to ask your advice by going through it. What is one piece of advice to somebody that wants to acquire a co-hosting company? Like, what would be the one piece of advice that maybe you didn't see coming into this?
I would say the one piece of advice for anybody that wants to acquire a co-hosting company, property management company, is to really understand what your end game is and understand like really why you want to acquire, right? Do you want to acquire because you want to expand your footprint in your market? Do you want to acquire because you want to expand to a different market? Do you want to acquire because you want to increase your revenue so that you can, get your team up, build up your team and your operation for the next acquisition? I think all those things are going to help you really find the right opportunity and know as you're going through the opportunity that this is understanding your why, not just like your personal why you're doing real estate and all that stuff, but like be crystal clear as to why you're doing this acquisition, because it'll help guide you through some really muddy waters, especially through a pretty tough due diligence process. And I would say, yeah, understand the real reason why you're doing an acquisition up front, and that'll guide you through finding the acquisition and actually getting through it.
Sweet, man. That's cherry on top. Cool, man. Let's get into the last few questions here. What
go.
educational resource or book or whatever impacted your life? It doesn't have to be real estate related, just anything.
This is one that I don't hear a lot, but I was like a huge Bigger Pockets fan for a while. And one book that like really changed my view on things was actually Scott Trench's book, Set for Life. I read that book and it was such an easy read. I think I flew through it in 2 or 3 days, but it just made me think so much differently about how I want to spend the best hours of my day and the best days of my life. And do I want to be doing that? Commuting to downtown LA or to Orange County 2 hours a day? Do I want to be sitting at a desk working for someone else? Or do I want to have the freedom to do something different? And so Set for Life by Scott Trench was one of those books that really just changed my mindset, which is huge. The other thing about
You
education,
live it too. You live it. I see you with your kids all the time.
I appreciate
You
that.
always hang out with your kids. I'm like, dude, this guy's full-time dad at this point.
I'll just say that dropping off my kids and picking them up from school is something I was not able to do when I was in the rat race in LA. And I appreciate that opportunity every day. Even if it breaks up, my schedule and all that stuff, like it's a blessing to be able to do that. And that's the part of the lifestyle that I've designed for myself. And I'm blessed to be able to live it out, something as simple as
That's
that.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's sick. Where does the future hold for Jason?
Oh gosh, definitely. I see more acquisitions in the future. I am starting to get a little bit more into more acquisitions as well as far as properties. So building the portfolio. My business partners are big fix and flippers, and they're finally getting me. I think they've just been nudging me. Are you gonna flip already? They haven't actually said that, but they've just been like, "What's up, man? You have all the tools, you have all the network, you have everything in front of you. Why aren't you doing flips?" And I've been doing some burrs, some rehabs and holds, but like doing flips, I think is definitely a big thing here, especially if the market changes and turns a little bit to help flipping a little bit more. We'll be doing more flips here in the future and scaling the acquisitions, scaling the flips, and continue to scale the property management cohosting company.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
I've
And
got a big number for 2025 on
what is
my
the number?
whiteboard right now. I won't share the number, but I'll text it to you directly just for some.
It's that big that you have to text it to me? Dang.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah,
That's
but,
awesome, man.
I won't share it here, but yeah, I got some big goals here for 2025.
Heck yeah, man. Share those with me. But last question. People, let's say somebody resonated with your story, wants to connect with you, wants to reach out to you. How can they get in touch?
Yeah, just follow me on IG, J Samson Solutions. Also follow our company Collective Stays on IG.
Can you spell that out?
Collective Stays, COLECTIVE, Collective Stays, STAYS, Collective Stays. Give our
Perfect.
company a follow, and you can find me there as well.
Awesome, man. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate you hopping on, taking some time away from everything you're doing, man. I'll let you get back into it, back into the trenches.
Thank you for Thank you for giving me a break from it all. Appreciate it.
Of course, man. Of course. You got to get yourself a massage next time. Maybe not hop on a pod, but you're grinding out here. So this is what it is. But I'll talk to you later, man. It was nice having you. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. Appreciate you, man.
Thanks, bro.
And that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to the Patrick Real Estate Show. If you found this episode helpful, please give us a follow and leave us a 5-star review. Your support truly means a lot. And connect with Patrick in the show notes below. Until next time.